speaking of my father. And my father's name was William Shelton, and his Indian name was Harriette. And his name came from several generations of our father's fathers. And I always thought my father had such a fascinating life. It was so totally different than the way we live today.
He got his name. They asked him what his name was, and he said, his Indian name, William. And of course, that was not acceptable to the Catholic priest. So they said, well, William, that's your name. It's a good Christian name. But you have to have two names. Who are you related to here? And one of the students, I think, was a man named Shelton. And he said, that's my cousin. All right, your name is Shelton then, William Shelton. This is Sandy Point on Whidbey Island where my grandfather was born. I remember being here as a child with my grandparents. We came by canoe from Tulalip to dig clams here and of course to camp out and enjoy ourselves. As I said, my grandfather was born here in 1869. And here he remained, or this was home to him and his parents, and they, visited other villages throughout the Sound until he was about 18 years old. And he became impressed with learning the ways of the white man, how a white man could tell his thoughts on a piece of paper by making marks. And this paper could be sent hundreds and hundreds of miles away. And another white man could look at the marks on that paper and he could know the thoughts of the person who wrote those marks. And this is something that amazed him so much that he wanted to learn. And of course, the Indian students in the boarding schools were exposed to new diseases in which they had no immunity, and a large number of the students died. And when he asked his parents if he could go to Tulalip Mission School and learn how to read and write, they said, no, you'll die if you go there. So he pondered this for some time, and he finally decided that this was something that he wanted to do. So one day he took his canoe and he ran away from home, as it were, by canoe. And he went to Tulalip and he presented himself to the Catholic priest there and said that he wanted to enroll and go to school.
They spoke our language all the time. My father didn't learn the English language until he was about 18 or 19 years old when he went to the mission school here at Tulalip. And then, as he says, he learned a lot of religion. Years after, my father didn't especially want to hear that much because, as he said, when they woke in the morning, they said their prayers. When they got up, they said their prayers. After they made their bed, they knelt down and said their prayers. And they said their prayers before a meal, prayers after. Just as I said, it was a Catholic school. But before that, his life was from the old traditions, because my grandparents did not move to this reservation, which is what they were supposed to move here, but they would only come to visit, stay 2 or 3 days and go back to the island, to their traditional homes. So that's where my father grew up. And the beaches of this Puget Sound were places that he knew so intimately. In real dark, middle of the night, he never felt afraid because all of it was home. All, even trees and birds and animals were close to us. Our family always liked to hear my father tell about this spirit quest. In our Snohomish tribe's language, we call this spirit quest Alatsu. That's the search for their guardian spirit. So this one time my grandparents were going to Nia Bay they were invited to a big gathering. And my father was about 15 years old. And over there near Fort Flagler, what is now Fort Flagler, he was sent out, and it was midnight. That's when the boys always went out. And it was a very stormy night. And out on the strait, the winds are just really very powerful. And it was a night of thunder and lightning. And all my father really remembered was that there were quite big waves, and he came to some rocks, and he was hanging on, and he had to leave what was called a homestick. Each boy had what was called a homestick, just so long, about an inch in diameter. And wherever the boys were sent, they carried the homestick. And they have to leave that stick where the parents or grandparents told them to leave it. They gave them a location to go. And so my father put his homestick up on a bank. And then he stayed there, and he said the thunder and the lightning was really very frightening. But he stayed there and he looked out to the straits and watched the thunder and lightning. And from that night, he had his Tulalip, which was this song, the Thunderbird song. fellow said he was really frightened. He was terrified. But after he stood there for several minutes and watched this terrible thunder and lightning, and the winds blowing, the winds were actually shrieking. But after he stood there a while, he had a feeling of peace, of restfulness, as though he had come home. And this was where he heard his spirit song, which was of thunder and lightning. In these spirit quests, what we called alatsit in our language, the young man, and in this case my father too, he saw this vision of this thunderbird coming down in that stormy sky and in the lightning. And he had heard of thunderbirds, but as a boy they never thought about it. It was a part of somebody else's life. But he saw this vision, and he made it into a totem pole, and that he also out there saw in that stormy water of the Sound, he saw a huge whale, and these were the powerful spirits that spoke to him and told him he would be a brave man, he would be a leader, he would live a long time, have a long life.
Well, we're here at the northern tip of Marrowstone Island, just south across the bay from Port Townsend. It was here perhaps 85 years ago that my grandfather came as a teenager in search of his guardian spirit. They must have camped just to the south of us around the point. He and his family camped for the night, and one of his elder male relatives, after it became dark, told him it was time for him to again go out and seek his guardian spirit. And as my grandfather related to his family, it was a stormy night, wind, high waves, thunder, and lightning. And he said that it was very difficult because of the rocky shore here and the beating of the waves, that he became very frightened that something might happen to him. And as he finally came around the point here, he remembered there was a lot of rocks and a high bluff. And he came ashore, and it was a terrible lightning storm with thunder. And he came ashore, and he prayed, and he listened, and then his vision came to him. So his quest was at an end. His life of prayer and meditation had been answered by the Great Spirit. And in this vision that he got, he heard this song. It was very different, very unique, and it would be his and his alone throughout his lifetime. And the Great Spirit spoke and said that he would be a leader of his people. And throughout his life, I believe that he was certainly that.
The reason I remember it is because my father was just extremely and completely dedicated to remembering and preserving these things that came from our old traditions. The Catholic Church and other churches all around here were very, very strong on Christianity, and that is what the Indians turned to. They had to have something to cling to, since it was against rules and regulations, against the law for the Indians to beat the drums and sing any of their traditional old songs. But my father believed in preserving these things, and so that's how I happen to know. He'd sing them quite often. I think in that book that was written by Loran, I think he mentioned somewhere that the revival of old traditions, Indian traditions, were initiated or started in Western Washington, and that was my father. He wrote to Washington, D.C., to the Commissioner of Indian Affairs and to the Secretary of the Interior, and asking if they could build a tribal longhouse, and then to beat the drums and sing the old songs. And I think I still have a letter that that says the Indians can do that. They have permission, but they're not allowed to continue more than the one day. They have to go home and I think it said take care of their cattle, horses and cattle.
This pole, or these two poles that are here, were formerly one large pole, probably almost 80 feet tall, that was carved by my grandfather almost 70 years ago. The figures that you see on the pole represent the guardian spirit images of a number of old Indians that were alive about 1911. My grandfather went to each one of these men and asked if he could be told the story of their guardian spirit quest. And then my grandfather visualized in his mind and carved on the face of these poles that you see the various spirits. For example, the one at the top up here, showing a man standing on top of a large mouth, some kind of a beast, with a pair of feet disappearing into it. That represents the warrior spirit of the man that my grandfather talked to. In his quest for his guardian spirit, a supernatural being came to him and said that you'll be strong in war, as this huge animal here, this beast, the supernatural being, is able to devour all people that it meets when it's on the warpath. So you will be. And so each of these figures represents a different story, a different quest, because the guardian spirit quest of our Sound Indians here was very individual. Each did not anticipate what he would encounter, and it was completely different and unique. There was no two spirits that one was different. Each one was very personal. The poles, I think, are very important. They're very important to me because they represent the feeling of my grandfather almost 70 years ago, who realized that the teachings of our Indians were going to be forgotten as we were being civilized here on the reservation. And he realized over 70 years ago the importance of remembering our culture and remembering who we were, because we cannot endure unless we know who we are and who we came from. And that's why these bowls here are especially important to me, because it gives me a touch with a generation that I never knew and with a culture that I never knew, only by hearing it from my grandparents and my mother, family like that. So it represents a link with a past that goes back thousands of years. So it's very important to me.
When my father died in February of 1938, like so many people, I felt truly lost. And I wrote this little bit of verse to my father's memory. My father is gone. As the appalling significance of those words flow through my mind, I have a raging desire to run crying to the ends of the world, to tear the earth, to clasp his beloved earthly remains in my arms, and never let him go. But I know I shall do none of those things, for I shall try to remember and live up to his teachings in regard to life and death. Though my eyes be dimmed with tears, I shall look down to the grass at my feet, the trees near and far in their calm solitude, the little birds, and remember that they too have that great mysterious gift called life. I shall lift my eyes to the distant mountains, crowned with majesty and beauty, and strive to realize and understand the beauty and majesty of life and death, just as he told me. When the winter comes with its bitter cold, when the rain blesses the earth with life-giving water, when the summer breezes whisper to the trees, when the waves go laughing up the beaches, when the strong winds rush exultantly over the earth, in all of these songs of nature I shall hear the cadences of my Father's beloved voice, telling me to be good, be kind, be brave. Thus to the earth, our mother, I commend his earthly remains, and to the great doki bush, the all-seeing, all-knowing, all-understanding, all-pervading presence, I commend his courageous spirit. Thus, in humble, incoherent words, I strive to express my heartfelt regard and esteem for my dearest friend, to pay a tribute to the most wonderful man I ever knew or ever shall know, my father, William Shelton.